All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America, brought to you by Accuracy in Academia. I'm your host, Don Irvine, joined by my co host, Brian McNichol.
Hello, deplorables, dregs, despicables, garbage, chumps, Neanderthals, semi-fascists, maggots, weirdos, and of course those dog-faced pony soldiers.
All right. So we're back. We haven't it's been almost a month.
Yeah, I had a basketball practice last night, and it was on the 15th, I guess. And the last basketball practice I had was the 19th of December. Because we went to Christmas and then we had snow, and this was the first time it worked out. So, like, you guys remember everything? They're like, sure,
yeah,
coach.
Right. Sure do, coach. We're ready to go. Yeah. So yeah. I don't know. It's been the weather. About an hour ago, I looked out my window upstairs, and there was some snow coming down. It's all gone now. But I'm like, wait a minute.
Right. It says on my little thing, like, what's the weather doing? It says it's snowing, but I don't see any snow.
Yeah. Well, it's on the notoriously bad Apple weather app. It showed it snowing for the 10 o'clock hour, part of it, but not after that. So it's like, okay, so it's probably not going to amount to much in most likelihood. But yeah, I just came back from a trip to Indiana to see my new grandson, and it turns out that they got hit. My daughter lives in kind of southwest Indiana, not in the path of normal big storms. Most of that heads a little bit more north, or a little bit more to the east, or more to the west. They usually, their weather kind of mimics ours to a certain degree. It gets hot and humid during the summer and things like that, but they're not known for big storms in general. Well, this last round was bigger than most, and
it was their turn.
Yeah, it was their turn. We were flying in, and we look out the airplane window, and all we could see was white stuff, right? And we're like,
Yeah.
that's, I guess we knew that it had snowed or had thought about it, but didn't really think about it. And then, we get on the ground and everything like that. And, a couple of my grandkids were with us, and we're like, oh, what's going on here? It's like, oh, school's been out all week and probably be out, for the next day as well. So they had no school for an entire week, because just like a lot of areas, right? Virginia has that problem more so than Montgomery County, or at least they did in the past, is that, Virginia would have counties that would have maybe a more suburban, area where things would get plowed right away and things were a little bit more up to snuff. And then I remember, at least in the old days, like Loudoun County was always behind, right? And Loudoun County, there were just, you could almost guarantee they would be closed all the time. I don't know if that's the case anymore, because I really don't listen to school closings. I don't have any skin in the game. But where
they're a little better than Fairfax now about getting the schools open. So the thing about Fairfax is, like, so this snow we got almost 6 inches here in Reston. But like people down county, like down the Mount Vernon area, they got almost 12. So, when you're saying, hey, should we open the schools, that's a different decision. And also, like, our roads here are better, but down there, not necessarily. Like Chantilly, Oakton, a lot of those school buses they're on spindly little 2-lane roads, and you're asking a lot of them, right, to keep every kid safe. So, the teacher told me last night, she said, well, we build in a lot of these days, and they're not shy about taking them. So,
yeah, I don't know what the rules are in that part of, of Indiana where my daughter lives, but that they don't think they had any qualms about basically just canceling school.
Right. That's one of the things about this is like there's none of these people have any qualms about canceling school. It's like the idea that, man, we got to get these guys back learning, is way down the pipe, right? It's like it's a secondary, tertiary, importance, right? They don't care.
Yeah. So it was. So then we learned, as we're driving around, we saw how shimmery the trees were, and so they had snow, and then they had like ice storm. on top of that. So they had, you know what ice does on a lot of trees is it weighs on
Bring
the
it down.
branches and brings trees down. So there was
Yeah.
a lot of that going on. My daughter, I think, she called the tree guys because I think part of her tree fell into the neighbor's yard, but they had a tree from the neighbor's yard that had fallen to theirs. And she's just like looking at these evergreen type of things. She says, I think maybe I'll just remove them because they were tall. But the tree guys are like, their business is booming. Like,
Yeah.
we'll
Yeah.
get to you when we get to you,
Yeah. That's right.
and everything like that. It was very pretty, but they were damaged. And then she said the neighboring town had a tornado. They knew somebody where the tornado kind of ripped through their area. I was like, okay. So here's my wife who has this, and I don't blame her at all for this. She wants to be near the grandchildren, and so she's constantly looking at Zillow, like, oh, could we move there? She showed me a house that was for sale. It's only $1 million. Okay. Just what I
Easy
need to
come,
do
easy
is
go.
trade in one home for another, go through all this stuff, you know. And she shows me all these pictures. We should just go take a look. I'm like, no. I mean, it's like after I'm dead, if you want to do something like that, that's fine. Okay. I don't, I have no control, but that's not happening. Particularly because I think that, the signal of a tornado coming through, a town nearby and some other things saying is that they could be in for more severe weather over time. I mean, my daughter has lived there in Indiana for, geez, at least 7 or 8 years now, I think, maybe longer, a little bit longer. They've never been hit like then they got, when we were there, there was more snow that came in over the weekend. So a lot of it's just like, okay. So they kind of had almost back-to-back storms, but it really kind of mucked things up a lot for there. And a lot of people apparently were just like, what's with the snow? They really weren't prepared for it and everything like that. So it kind of shakes people up when all of a sudden you not used to a whole lot of snow, and then you get a lot of snow, and then you're like, I'm not prepared for this snow.
Yeah. And us, we didn't get a whole ton, but what we have hasn't gone anywhere. We're
Well,
still dealing
okay,
with
so
it.
perfect. That is perfect segue to what my next thing was going to be. So I returned home yesterday, and I'm so I don't know if you've been out. Well, if you've been out anywhere in the Dulles area or Tyson's Corner area, they're doing all that road work, right? And it's horrendous. So I'm leaving Dulles. I finally get to the point where I'm going to hit the Beltway, and then everything bogs down, which was the way it was a month ago. It didn't really surprise me because I know this is a major road project, but we're inching along, things like this. And I think actually part of that wasn't just the road work. Some car had flipped completely over on the other side of the Beltway, and it's that rubbernecking. I was like, the rubbernecking is the bane of existence for drivers. You're trying to get somewhere, and people are rubbernecking, and you're like, really? Okay,
Yeah. Your
everybody's
huge
slowing down to look at
backups,
that.
and you finally get up there, and you're like, it's not even on my side of the road.
Yeah,
Like, we
look,
didn't have to stop for this
you
at
can
all.
see 5 miles or 10 miles worth of backup or whatever it was on the other side. It's like, you're not on there. Just drive. Will you please just drive?
Yeah.
I mean, just so I want to get home and things, and I'm just like, oh, it just drives me crazy about that. But it's I don't know. I mean, it's just the conditions of the way different things are around here of doing things. I wanted to get home, and I got bogged down in this traffic, and I'm like, oh, this is just so. I don't know. It's annoying. It's annoying when you get stuck like that. Um, but so luckily, my wife, when she returns on Saturday, she's flying into BWI. It's like I can deal with that on a late night on a Saturday night. Fine,
Yeah.
much
It's no
much
biggie.
much better.
Yeah.
you know, don't hopefully no more weather issues. But when I pull into my driveway yesterday afternoon, I'm like, really, nothing melted.
Yeah. Right. Nothing.
I was hoping because the thing I had left behind undone that I'm supposed to do is that we have the common sidewalk that runs through all the neighborhood. and under Montgomery County rules or laws, every homeowner is supposed to clear that walkway in front of their home. Well, I really didn't have enough time to do that before we left town. And I thought, okay, get the driveway clear, get the sidewalk from the driveway, most of the driveway to the house clear, and then maybe the rest will melt. I come back and it'll be solved. And then I pull into the driveway and I'm like, there was one spot. And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm looking at the weather forecast and like, it doesn't look like it's going to get really warm and sunny enough that much of it will melt off. And I'm like, does this mean I'm going to have to go out there and chip away at this stuff?
Yeah,
I don't
get
want
a whole nother week of like single digit temperatures and all this stuff. So it's not over yet.
I may be putting in a call to my friendly local missionaries and say, hey, look, I've got a little bit of a cold. I probably shouldn't be out there. Can you please go and shovel this part of even the top part of my driveway, which is basically shady, nothing, right?
Yeah.
And I guess we had a little bit of snow while I was gone. So I think it got, we got a little top off on that. I'm like,
right.
Because when I parked the car, I'm like, wait, I had a little bit of pavement there before. What happened here? So yeah, I wasn't overjoyed at the way that part of it worked out at all. So anyway, weather report that way. And we'll just stick with the weather briefly and then go on to the other news. So the other big weather news really is not cold, but heat in the sense of California wildfires. These wildfires are insane. This is some of the worst wildfires, I guess, that California has faced. Maybe going to lead to what maybe that may classify as maybe the worst fire disaster they've ever had, if not in U.S. history. I don't know what the history is, but it's consumed a lot of homes and
a lot of expensive homes too.
A lot of expensive homes. Yeah,
property.
and it doesn't necessarily. I mean, a lot of times in the past, I know I would say, look, if you live on a mountain, and you live far away from where the water is and stuff like that, it's going to be harder for the fire, company to save your home. But a lot of these neighborhoods, one of the problems was that they had fire hydrants, but they didn't have enough water in the system.
Right.
So there are a lot of problems in fighting this fire. A lot of finger pointing go on to Gavin Newsom, to Karen Bass, the mayor of LA, and a lot of other things. I'm sure it's a combination of a lot of factors. Firefighting is no easy task and relies on so many different things to go right in order to
water pressure first among them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and Trump and others have been warning them for years. Like, you have to manage the area between the forest and the residential area, which California has resolutely refused to do. You have to manage the floor of the forest, which California has resolutely refused to do. You have to manage, breaks, like, brush breaks, make it where the fire can't go one to the other. They've resolutely refused to do it. You got to not send all the fresh water into the ocean, right? Because you're trying to save the darter or whatever the little, fish was or whatever. And, which they were advised to do. They were told over and over to do this, right? And they resolutely refused to do so. So now they're living with the consequences of all these, green extremist positions. And, you're right. That's not all the story. The weather was an awesome opponent in this one. And, it appears that you had arsonists adding to the problems, which is its own, story. But, the fact of the business is, this land, forest, water, asset management all failed here. The things that, what is government really here for? It's really here to protect your property, right? 2A, you protect yourself, and government's here to protect your property. And, they didn't do that. They failed in their basic mission.
Yeah, no. And I mean, part of this obviously too is that, with fires, I mean, it's wind. When they get wind, it's bad news.
Yeah.
And then this time of year, they're still facing the Santa Ana winds. And
right. And everything's dry and dead.
Right.
Everything is its max burnability, so to speak.
Right. And the thing, every time I hear Santa Ana winds, all I can do is recall the time I had a small rental car. I was in Southern California, and I thought, okay, I'm going to drive over to Simi Valley. I'm going to go see the Reagan Library. And I'm driving down the freeway, and it was roughly about November-ish of that particular year. And this has probably been 2, 3 decades. And well, yeah, I know. I'm sure it was even before Reagan. It was a long time ago. Anyway, so I'm driving down, and I'm like, I'm starting to realize I have to hold on to my car with dear life because these winds were so strong. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm an Eastern guy. I'm an Easterner, and I'm like, yeah, Santa Ana winds. What's that? That's wind, dude, big deal. And I'm driving through this valley, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like you feel like your car is going to be lifted up and just taken somewhere. It was
yeah,
crazy. So I'm very sensitive to when people say Santa Ana winds. I'm like, do not mess with the Santa Ana winds. I mean, those are very severe winds, and that can create a lot of problems. And that's unfortunately they whipped up here for the fire, only exacerbating the problem for the firefighters and everything like that. So, but it's unfortunate there. Lives were lost in this. A lot of people did get out, but like you said at the beginning too. Expensive homes. A lot of Hollywood types lost their homes. And others. People who are very wealthy just saw their homes go up in smoke. uh, I do have, maybe it's an extra. I don't know. I don't know. I have these mixed emotions. I mean, I do believe in, fair market, free market capitalism, but I also don't like the fact that, landlords look like some of them are going to take advantage of the situation with an extra housing crunch with all these people who've been displaced and who are looking for any kind of housing, that they're jacking up the rates right now. I understand the free market, but a lot of these people are in extreme distress, and you're going to add to their stress by all of a sudden, jacking up your rental price by 20% or something like that. I think you got to at least hold the line for them at this. There's a lot of suffering going on that I don't think any of us want to see in California. But these things don't help Gavin Newsom or Karen Bass or their political ambitions. They'll be remembered for this fire as well, among other things, of just
right.
complete mismanagement of how they handle things over there.
Yeah, which is kind of a broader topic. We were laughing about it. I think maybe the last time we were on here, we were talking about people talking about Kamala Harris running again in 2028, and like all the donors are mad at her, and she ran a really terrible race, and how can they do that? But if you look at the bench, right, the star on the bench is Newsom, right? He's the most likely guy they have, right? And there's no way that after this failure, it can be him, right? The ads write themselves, So I mean, you've knocked out essentially one of the top contenders, and there are not. I mean, I'm not knowing who these other contenders are. I don't think that they will have rid themselves of anti-Semitism enough by 2028 to endorse Shapiro. So, I don't know. I mean, it's possible. I mean, it helps. The timetable helps that looks like they're starting to wind down the war in Gaza. I would not say this is the permanent ceasefire, but it is a ceasefire and so forth like that, which gives them 4 years to sort of deal with that aspect of what they've done here, right? But this party is, imagine the commercials you could run against a Democrat in 2028. Say, here's what they think of the Jews, right? Just stuff that they have publicly said. So I don't know. I think that this helped to. I don't want to say helped Harris, because it looks like her house is in some danger too. But politically, like a contender got knocked out, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty. I think it's pretty damaging. I mean, of course, we're several years away before the next cycle, and a lot of things can be forgotten. But political operatives opponents will bring those things up. You want to take Newsom down? This is yet another thing you can point towards as to why he would not be fit to run the nation.
Yeah, his argument is competence, right? That's his value statement, and obviously he didn't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, anybody who looked to him to lead on this, they were looking in the wrong place,
Yeah.
for this. And and Bass, that was not good for her political future. I mean, I think
Right.
she,
I
I
don't
think,
think she really has one at this point. I think
yeah, yeah, I
she may
think,
not even survive her term. There may be a
right.
recall, and
Right, I
there's
mean,
talk of,
that could happen, and or yeah, if it doesn't get a recall when the next election comes up, she's gonna have a hard time surviving that.
right.
So,
And they had a pretty good candidate, right? It was a Democrat, but he was a moderate, and he understood how to get this stuff done. And he went and bailed out his neighborhood. He went and hired private firefighters and saved his entire neighborhood, right, from these fires. So I mean, he managed the situation. The opponent managed the situation, right? He was in a situation where, it was like we're gonna elect the most radical candidate, right? The one that pokes the eye into the establishment of Trump and whoever the hardest, right? And so they elect, she's essentially a foot soldier radical with no leadership ability and no idea what she's even managing.
yeah, yeah,
Some of her quotes of like her lack of knowledge about what's going on is appalling.
it's amazing. People, this is just who they run. All right,
And we
so
tried to warn them. That's the thing, is like we've tried to warn them. Like you can elect Democrats who are not radical idiots, right? They're out there. They do exist, right? And they are dangerous to us. Like you look at Fetterman. Fetterman runs for president. How exactly do we attack him? What is our attack line, right? I mean, start thinking about it, because he's probably thinking about it, and he's probably liking like where he is in the political firmament right now, right? I mean, he seems more credible than Newsom or any of these other people that they could consider, hopefuls or whatever. Mayor Pete, would you take Fetterman over Mayor Pete? Yeah, I mean, I think most people would. So Fetterman over, Vance, I don't know. That's a tough question, right? That would be a tougher question. But if you keep choosing the more radical, nonsensical candidate every time, these are the things that happen when you don't have qualified people.
yeah, Fetterman is a fascinating example of someone whose political track has, the whole trajectory and everything has completely changed. We've gone from the guy who, who had trouble. He had that stroke and he had a lot of trouble, on the campaign trail, and then he regains his health, and then there was a lot of mocking for his down dressing and everything like this, but his support of different policies, and then also some of and the other things he said, here in the last couple of years, as well as making the trip to Mar-a-Lago. I mean, this is not the guy that we thought he was in a lot of ways. He becomes a somewhat attractive candidate, I would think, for the Democrats, should he decide to do that, to run, because he's just not he's not the radical leftist that a lot of these other guys. If you're not going to be able to get your put your arms around and say and support Shapiro, because you just can't support this Jewish governor who has arguably done a decent job. I mean, he's popular,
Yeah,
and and everything. Then maybe Fetterman is the guy, because you look around the rest of the bench and you're like, no, not much there right now.
right.
Uh, so
That's if Fetterman's not a Republican by then.
yeah, right. I mean, who
Yeah.
knows? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff where they're working on him, saying like, hey, look, we're in the majority. Come and join with us. You can be with the
Yeah.
majority again. And
The other thing that's interesting is like Georgia sends us sharply partisan members of Congress, right? All of them are up here. They're very partisan, very pro whatever they are, right or left. Whereas like Pennsylvania, it's almost all, they're very close to being one or the other, right? They're all very moderate, very close to the center. So I mean and those politicians are the ones that are most likely to change parties, because their other party gets too extreme, so they can't. I'm not these guys, but I'm not extreme either. So it's possible. Arlen Specter switched parties. He's kind of he's not far from where Fetterman is politically. So I mean, it's I don't know that he's going to do it. He hasn't ever said he's going to do it. But I could see it being based on an issue. Something comes up and he just cannot live with them anymore. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
And usually that's what it takes. It takes some issue or issues to turn them that way. I mean, it's not just, oh well, I want to be in the majority or whatever. It is like, here are the issues that concern me, where the Democrats have left me, or
Right.
the party's left me. I mean, Casey was hard to defeat because he wasn't overly radical. I mean, he hewed a little
Right.
more towards the center, and so it was hard for a conservative come in there and really carve out a niche
Right.
and beat him. So
And our candidate was not strong, right? He got
right.
trounced in the governor's race and so forth. He wasn't even that popular of a Republican. So, the fact that the Republicans won that race tells you just how big a blowout this really was for the right.
Right. Absolutely. All right. Well, you alluded to the ceasefire, in Gaza. So they've come to a tentative agreement. Hostages to be released starting, I think, on the 19th, and though I see that Netanyahu has already delayed the vote because he says that Hamas is already reneging on parts of this deal, which is like, if that's, I wouldn't be surprised, because
Right.
you can't trust Hamas to begin with. Though Joe Biden apparently thought it was Hezbollah that they'd signed the agreement. So one more.
But he was deeply involved. Thanks for your leadership, Joe.
Yeah. It's like, hey, look, this is great. I just brokered this peace agreement between Hezbollah and Israel, right? Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Actually, so what happened was, and I do give them some credit for this, because Trump had a guy who had an idea how to do it, right? Whitcliffe, something like that. And he led a Trump team and that joined with a Biden team to actually have the meetings and have the discussions and nail this down. So, credit to the Trump team for having an approach that's able to solve it immediately, but credit to the Biden team for standing back and letting them pursue it, and endorsing it and showing one face to the rest of the world. So, his team gets a little credit here. He's attempting to say, what did he say? Are you joking? It's like, everyone knows that Joe did not move the ball on this for 2 years, right? That nothing moved on it at all until Trump started pushing and telling them he was going to, vaporize the rest of them and so forth. Then all of a sudden they found their way clear to start freeing some hostages. No American hostages are in this deal, from what I understand. There's 6 left, and we believe 3 of them are probably alive, but there's no hostages. There's no agreement in all this to let our people go.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I think we've been kind of calling this in a general sense that with Trump winning the election and taking office, foreign policy changes dramatically,
Right.
and I think this is an example of what happens, is that here we are 4 days away from the inauguration, and all of a sudden we get this deal. Now, like everything else, it has to hold. The Hamas has got to hold up their end. Israel is not just, Israel doesn't, Israel still is of the mind, rightfully so, that Hamas really, shouldn't be governing Gaza, and they don't really deserve the right to exist. But, they do need to get those hostages back, dead or alive. They need to repatriate these people, at least, and then they can deal with the ramifications thereafter. But yeah, nothing much has happened really under Biden. Here we are, just days away from Trump taking office, and stuff is starting to happen like that. So I think this is the tip of the iceberg with foreign policy. That other issues that are out there, we may see other resolution or other action that has not gone anywhere under the Biden administration. So there's
a lot of people that want to get on Trump's good side. A lot of them.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is the thing about this, is just that, after 4 years of Trump and people just vilifying him at the end, and people, all these never Trumpers and Trumpers and all these people,
Yeah, all the court cases and
yeah, and
nonsense.
all this stuff, all the people out to get him for one reason or another, all the corporations and whatever that just like you kick him off Twitter, you do this, you do that, uh, because he's just not, you can't do that. This is like, it's a brand new day. All of a sudden, like the selective memory. We have no idea what happened before, but we know he's the president now, and he is putting out policies that are favorable to us. So therefore, we like him. I mean, yesterday, for example, just in the financial world, bank stocks, the major banks, the first major banks that announced had really good earnings, and part of this also is, you know we're seeing a change in policy already, right? We talked about how Biden has already kind of given over the presidency to Trump before he actually officially takes reins. But there are things behind the scenes, including stuff that happens at the Fed level and things like that. And so banks, which have been hamstrung by these reserve requirements, are not going to face the same strict guidelines there. That helps their earnings. That helps free them up to do a lot of other things. And so there's the positive developments. I mean, Lena Khan will soon be out of a job. I expect that we will see a lot more merger proposals going forward, and a lot more getting actually approved, because you know Lena Khan and they were just not merger friendly at all. Almost any merger that came up, it's like they found a way to object to that and say, no, 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 you can't do this, it's bad for the people, even if the evidence was scant. She lost most of her cases
Yeah,
too. If
kind
it
of
had,
tells that.
yeah, she
FCC will be in new hands.
Yep.
Will be good, which is a huge thing for like Section 230 and how social media operates. That's going to be a big thing. That's why all the social media people are kissing the ring, bending the knee, whatever they want to call it, contributing. That's other people. They didn't give anything to Trump in 2016, and not a time of day to Trump in 2020. But all of a sudden, it's like there must be. How you get these programs. These are our gold supporters and our silver supporters and whatever. And to be a gold supporter, you must have to give $1 million, because they're all giving $1 million. All those big tech companies have lined up to give their $1 million to the inauguration fund, which Trump says he doesn't need that much for his inauguration. The rest will go to Republican congressional candidates in 2022. Because he's trying to build out, make sure he doesn't lose his majorities and so forth. But it's funny to just watch all these people realize, like, the good policy, their best hope policy wise is Trump, is the guy they hated, right? And it's also acknowledgement, and you're starting to see this in a lot of ways, that a lot of the stuff that has gotten said about Trump over the last 5 years, 10 years, whatever you want to call it, was not true, right? He's not a Russian asset. He was not colluding with Putin. He did not say that, there were very fine people on both sides. He's not, endorse bigots, all these things. It's like they're getting caught in lies. He did send soldiers on January 6th, right? He did order soldiers that didn't show up for whatever reason. We can look at that later, but all these things that they said he didn't do, he did in fact do, and it's all coming out. So it's also coming out that there was a lot of federal provocateurs on January 6th, right? So we're finding out that all these things, all the lies that the left has repeated dogmatically for the last 5 years, are being exposed. And so there's a big loss of trust they're going through, and it's almost like, to come back, they're going to have to sort of be reborn, almost. It's sort of like kill the old one and start a new one, because what they have now is not trustworthy, and it's not forward looking, and does not really present a workable program for the future.
I'm going to say, I mean, do you think? I mean, it's odd to say, but I'm sure others may have said it, that in some ways, was the Biden administration, the Democrat rule over the last 4 years, was that good for Trump?
Um, well, I mean, it helped him get reelected, right? Showing their competence, it was pretty easy choice for most people who are not dogmatically left, right? To say, I mean, that's why the independents went his way, and Latino men and people are not deeply tied to a party already. He was a pretty easy choice. So yeah, being incompetent for 4 years did help him.
Yeah, and I mean, part of that too is just it's just the businesses, corporations, which are now throwing money at Trump and whatever. Uh, they saw 4 years of what the Democrats did,
Yeah,
and the Democrats went after their businesses, and tried to really
right.
destroy a lot of their businesses and regulate them, out of existence in some sense. Uh, and they're looking at Trump and they're like, oh, wait a minute, but Trump he's embraced crypto. He kind of likes TikTok.
Yeah,
He's all these things are going on here, and all of a sudden they're like, okay, back to 2016 to 2020. Yeah, everybody vilified him. We bought into all that hype. We banned him. We did all that stuff. We said his brand of politics was not what we wanted. And yet now, after we've seen 4 years of the Biden administration and just how much that they're anti-business and they wanted to put us out of business in a lot of cases. Yeah, we'll take Trump over that any day of the week. And here's my check.
yeah, that's right. So,
So
there's a lot of people have recognized that reality, and they've recognized that, the country performed a lot better. It's interesting, Biden, they're collecting and distributing a big pack of lies about how he did and how many jobs he created and how much economic growth. And, there's another cottage industry of people out there saying, no, here's the actual record, So it's pretty funny to like watch them go at each other every day on X or whatever. But I mean, the country rendered its verdict on who we thought was right about this, right? That's why Trump won, right? Is that it's not because they love the warm and fuzzy Trump, right? It's because you're looking at two of them, and one of them is lazy, drunken DEI hire with a 75 IQ, and you don't really have a choice, So I don't know. I think we
warm and
made the right
fuzzy.
choice.
Warm and fuzzy. Well, three words, I guess. Three words I never generally associate with Trump,
Right.
right?
But I mean, now it's like, it was that was better than what we have.
Well, I go back. You go back to the presidential debate, and then you say you look at the competence factor, and you're like, okay, so these two guys are relatively close in age, but Donald Trump far outshines Biden, outperforms him. It's like the mental capacity, acuity, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
There was a divide that was huge. I mean, it was just huge. And just yeah, I don't know. It's been a fascinating year this past year to watch how things have developed, and now we're on the brink
And
of a
the
new.
and the margin that Trump held over Biden before the day of that debate, is essentially the margin he won by. It like really didn't change anything.
Yeah.
And Biden's over here claiming that he'd have won if he'd have stayed on the ticket, and I don't see it. I don't see how they could have turned it around.
No, I mean that's just that is extremely wishful thinking, and this is also where you're like, okay, I thought I got pushed out. They forced me out, and they said Kamala's the person, and she'll be able to beat Trump, and she was a horrible candidate, and and
With
got
a
wiped out.
terrible campaign.
Terrible campaign, got wiped out, and so now, yeah, you do look at the stuff in hindsight, and you do your Monday morning quarterbacking or whatever, and say the what ifs come up. What if I had stayed in the race? How much different would it have been? Well, nobody really knows for sure, but we're probably pretty sure that it wouldn't have been any better. It wouldn't have been much
Right.
better. I mean, Biden still would have lost. He was probably heading to an even more historical loss at some point. It was just bad for the Democrats. They didn't, their plan A was bad. Their plan B was bad.
Yeah. and they couldn't, and they really didn't have a plan C. So
That's right. By the very fact that once again, they anointed Kamala Harris as as their nominee, with to have someone to be your national party nominee for president without having a single primary voter cast their vote for. I think
right.
that's just not the way it should be at all. The Democrat they should have figured something else that would have been much better and much more democratic.
Right.
The process for them as well. So President Biden had his. I'm glad that we decided. I'm glad I decided, to do the show today because we get to talk a little bit about Joe Biden's farewell speech. It's like I kind of like, oh no.
Yeah. So, his thing is, the oligarchs are taking over the country. Like, oligarchs have been running the country, man. Oligarchs were a big part of what you were doing. They were a big part of what Obama was doing, right? He was, Iger or whatever his name was in the office every day, right? So, I mean, the corporations are going to have a say in government. They buy their way in, and they get it. They have a say. Should they? It's part of free. If you want a democratic government, right, and it's kind of a reality. And it's like LBJ said, if you can't drink their whiskey and enjoy the company of their women and come up here and vote against them the next day, you don't belong here, right? So. Yes, there are some rich guys hanging around, but it seems to me, and I mean, it could just be, you could say, okay, this is a partisan view, right? But I think you got to give these guys the benefit of the doubt. I don't, other than helping the country improve so that he will be selling his products in a better economic climate. What is Musk's motivation here? Why else is he here? Right? People can go, he's going to steal money. The guy's got, $400 billion. Why would he steal money? Why would he expose himself to that kind of allegation? You know what I mean? It's like he's not going to steal money. Trump is not there to steal money. They have things they want to do, but they understand the world as people who have created prosperity, right? So they're saying, let's get the country into a mode where it can create prosperity again.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're right. I mean, rich people have been around. They've always been around.
Yeah.
For Biden to say this is kind of ridiculous. It's kind of basically, it's like, okay, but what's happening here is that liberal leftist oligarchs are out.
Yeah.
Libertarian conservative oligarchs are in.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what. Here's your thought experiment for you. If Trump named, head of Department of Agriculture the general manager of your local Safeway, what would the reaction be to that? Hey, he knows where that food comes from. He's ear right down on the ground of the business, right? What would get said about him? He's totally unqualified. How can you get a guy who's just running one little Safeway in Rockville, Maryland, and put him in charge of the USDA, right? You know what I mean? That's what they would say. So if you put a little guy, you're going to get that. If you put a big guy, you're going to get this. It's just, and remember the root of all leftism is jealousy, right? It starts with them being jealous. So, whatever it is that you can be jealous of, that's what they're jealous of. They just look for the thing to be jealous of, and that's what they attack.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
The really alarming thing in that speech, though, was the talk about the misinformation and disinformation, and he wants the social media, the big tech firms, to go back to monitoring and censoring, all commentary that doesn't, praise him and disparage Trump. I mean, they were. This is the worst president for the First Amendment in my lifetime, if not ever. So, I guess there's more tools, there's more opportunity to suppress speech now than there ever was before, and there may be more reason to, because of the way virality works on the internet and so forth. But this guy is a censor, right? At the end of the day, he's for censorship.
Yeah. No, I mean, it just, he talked about the dangers of a tech industrial complex. It's like, well, What the heck are we doing here? This is all of this to me is still just this problem. It's like, look, he's really ticked off that he was forced out and that the Democrats lost control of the White House, and they've lost control of the Senate, and they couldn't regain control of the House, and so that Trump is going to get a majority of his agenda, getting through Congress, and it's going to be a different day. And so, he gives this very dark speech, kind of,
Yeah.
kind of like how the Washington Post has, years ago under Trump, they changed their tagline to "Democracy dies in darkness." This is
Yeah.
that same kind of a theme. It's like, watch out, people. Trump's coming back to town, and there are going to be some really dark days ahead, and our country's freedom and is threatened. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And it's like, who's going to buy that line except liberal? I guess the reaction has really been like, liberals are like, oh, it sent a chill up my spine. It was so good. And I'm like, did you really listen to that speech?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is
You had
this
that
a
typed
Chris
up
Wallace's
before he
Barack
started.
Obama
Yeah.
moment?
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Just how they fall into line on this is like, no, that was not a good speech. This is not something you want to say as a highlight to go out on. It was a terrible speech overall.
Yeah.
Uh,
It would have all worked out if these guys wouldn't have let him talk bad about me.
Yeah. Yeah. you know, and he's upset too that the people that supported the Democrats and him, years ago, basically they've now, a lot of them have switched their allegiance over to Trump.
Yeah.
But once again, it goes back to what I said earlier, is because it's because of what your administration did. Your administration tried to take them out of business. Your administration, as you just mentioned, tried to say, you have to go and censor people on your platforms, your social media companies. And you have to do that. That's not the way it should operate. And therefore, it's kind of like the light bulb went off. They Trump wins, all these things, and they're like, okay, wait a minute. And it was like, we're definitely seeing a night and day difference now. We've been through one Trump administration, we've been through one Biden administration, and we're now going to go through a second Trump administration. But we've also seen that where Trump has smartly embraced a lot of things that really helped him. I mean, the crypto thing, it's not for you, it's not for me, but for a lot of other people. Elon Musk, he was the darling of the liberals years ago, right? This whole solar energy, the electric cars, the Teslas and everything like this. But it's, he starts
now they're like, he accepts subsidies. It's like, let's cut the subsidies, I'm all for you. No more green energy subsidies, no more EV subsidies. I mean, you don't want to pay for the space program. Okay, whatever. That's sort of an up and down priority, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, the reason he's in those businesses is because there are government subsidies in them, right? And he knows that the government doesn't know what anything should cost, so he makes a lot of money overpricing things, right? And it's our fault because we allow the government to do these things. We vote for people who vote for this stuff, right? So he's just taking advantage of what's there. And he has said he thinks the EV industry would be healthier without subsidies, right? And I believe that he believes that. And I think the same thing is true of solar. If they want to get into it with him about space, right? I would say, okay, none of your other guys are doing what he's doing. They're not achieving what he's achieving. If you get one that can match him and they can do it for a lower price, then okay, whatever. I don't think he cares about that either, right? He is trying, he understands the competition as it really is. And I look forward to, I think that, one of the most exciting things that's going to happen in this new administration is Doge, right? They're really going to get out a bunch of stuff and look at it and see about saving some money. I also, you may have noticed the sort of conservative jihad, all of a sudden internal battle amongst conservatives about RFK, right? How behind RFK should we get, given his, he's pro-choice and he's a far left guy, right? But, if your thing is cutting costs, he is what he's talking about is going after the causes of chronic disease, right? And obesity and so forth, things that make us all unhealthy. And like, how much of that can we fix, eliminate, change to our better, right? And improve on, and how much could you lower costs like that? And I think that, a big thing is going to be, if we can't get our arms around the cost of healthcare, whatever else you do to cut the budget is not really going to matter. The big thing is Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. If you're not willing to look in those areas for reform, you're not going to do any serious reform.
Yeah, I'm on the fence on RFK because of what you were saying. In essence,
it's scary, but I mean,
yeah.
change is always scary.
But he makes me curious as to the things that he's talking about. It's like, can you affect and make a change there where change needs to be made, where no one was willing to do it before?
Right.
I'm willing to give him a shot to see what happens. If it doesn't work out, you find someone else. But
right.
why?
And it's not working out now.
Yeah.
Right. The baseline. It's not like he can ruin the current success. Right.
Right.
There ain't no current success.
It's right.
Right. So, and that's another thing is like, the thing that really ticks off the left about Trump is that he pushes levers of power they didn't even realize existed. Now it's like you think about HHS, you think about the objections to RFK. Well, that's a job for an administrator, someone who's administered a big corporation and knows how to move zillions of dollars around and so forth. Okay, that's what we've always done. And now we have millions of dollars getting moved around with doing questionable amounts of good, right? So you have someone and says, I'm going to use this to change how we spend that money and what we spend it on, what we prioritize. They're like, hey, you can't do that. You're supposed to just be a bureaucrat who moves millions of dollars around, right? So we're on a different path completely now.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where we go with that at this point. We also got to say, or the press did, to get to say goodbye to Karine Jean-Pierre. Ooh, man. Once again, we had a terrible president, we had a terrible press secretary. Goodbye.
Yeah, I mean, it's like she didn't really, and I don't think you can. Here's the thing about it. There are some questions I would love to ask her, but you're never going to get it. She would never take the question, and if she did, she wouldn't give you a straight answer anyway. But like, okay, we know now that Biden was not really running the country, right? I mean, enough has come out now that we know that like basically a bunch of aides were, doing it together, basically, right? So who was telling her, who was putting the stuff in her briefing book? If you could ask that question, say this. You could ask that question, say this. Who was making up those answers, right? Who did she deal with on that, right? Was that, I don't think it was her, right? So that's that's another person who's sufficiently goofball that we should all be concerned. And B, it doesn't really show you, it sort of give you insight into like, where did the decision making come? I think it's going to be a fascinating thing to learn in the years ahead. It's like, how were they deciding things over there? How were they doing business, right? Because, you really can't tell from what they were, from what was coming out. And obviously Joe had very little involvement in it.
And we had this comment here.
Okay. I like it.
Never know what you're going to get. All right. So
we did our part. We did our part to help.
Yeah, we're trying. All right. And then one last thing before we close it out, I guess, or maybe a couple of last things. Going back to some of the things you mentioned censorship and everything like that before. We saw an amazing turnaround by Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook, right? In terms of his support, really but he's moving his fact-checking team to Texas from California. They're going to go to a community notes type of setup, just like Twitter. Elon has done with Twitter X, which has got a lot of the lefties up in arms and things like that. But that whole thing about going to community notes type of thing, that's a big deal. That's a huge
That's
change.
a huge deal, especially for Zuckerberg. Remember, like, who uses Facebook? The olds, right?
Yeah.
Guys, people older than us, Don. I don't mean us. I mean those others, right? So but that's the thing. It's like the seniors. It's like, oh, they rely on this for truth. It's like, okay, they'll still get truth, right? They'll get better truth because they'll have it actually. You can actually see the sourcing, right? You don't just see the item disappear or the item declared false. You actually see why people think it is, and it actually engenders debate. I think the community notes, I have people who disagree with me about this, and they say that itself is a form of censorship. And, I sort of see what they're saying, but I believe it's better. And, and I also think that all these guys are looking around and they're seeing that something's going to change with Section 230, right? That the platforms are either going to be declared editors or declared not editors. And they're not sure about like fully going down either path where it leads, right? So I think what they're saying now is we're not really in the business of stopping people from saying stuff on our platforms, aside from selling dope or prostitution or transnational crime. If you try to do that, we will stop that. But everything else, the people are deciding amongst themselves, because that removes the platform as the editor, right? And that's what they got to get out of that, because if you're the editor, you're responsible for all the content on the platform.
Yes, and I understand it. I mean, it's basically like if you say something, bad or whatever was bad before, whatever they would have not knocked you off before or removed it, but they will leave it in place unless it actually starts to get a lot of traction, and is known to be disproven or whatever like that. So and then also if you lost access to your accounts in the past or whatever, regaining access to your account will be a lot easier, So because there was,
Right.
I mean, we probably both have friends who got put into like Facebook jail for things that they said, or put into Facebook jail for things they said but didn't realize that what they said was against the policy. I mean, I got
Right.
locked out of my account one day, and I'm like, why? I comment a handful of times a day. What the heck am I saying? I was like, I mean, I got it back within hours, but it's like, you can't call anybody. You just have to go through this appeal process. And luckily I got it back, but I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I share legitimate news articles, and and I say a few things, but it's usually about family and church. I don't know what the problem is.
Right.
So,
But yeah, I mean, I think that people, are fed up with the censorship. I think Trump struck a good tone on that. He had, everybody kind of nodded in agreement on that one. So yeah, I think that's definitely an issue that he played well and Biden did not.
all right. So at this point, why don't you go ahead and take us out?
TikTok CEO is going to go to the inauguration. It looks like it's going to be illegal to be on TikTok for one day. And then I think Trump will find some way to do it. Jack Smith report was a dud because it didn't really say anything new. Jack is absolutely sure he could have gotten a conviction. Of course, I hope so. I hope you're not indicting people when you're not really sure if you can get a conviction. Wes Moore wasted all the money. That's no surprise there. The Weiss report was interesting. It basically said that they were pressured to look away from certain things, and it could have been much more there. I wonder why he waited till this moment to say that, when it would have been much more appropriate to say it earlier. And your thing about the wage growth, it looks like we lost about 2% of wage growth under Biden, gained about 7 or 8% under Trump. Trump, I think, added $5,500 for household income. Biden subtracted almost 2,000. We can't get these guys out of town fast enough. And Michelle O skipping the inauguration. I really don't care who shows up to the inauguration, and I don't blame anybody. It's going to be 25 degrees, 20 degrees. Marty said high of 20 that day. Anybody wants to go, go. If you don't want to go, don't go.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I signed up. I don't know if I'm going to get a ticket or not, but I'm going to basically say if it's like, if it's like well below 30, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah. I think that's why I have my TVs.
Yeah.
I'm going to watch my TV.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like, I think no matter what the weather is, I think it'll be a huge turnout because people, I mean, from what I can see, the people really want to come out and see that. So this is going to be an inauguration like none other. I did want to say one
enough
last
energy all over Washington right now.
I did want to say one last thing about Zuckerberg, which I forgot to mention, which is another thing that Zuckerberg said was that the constant pressure he was getting from the Biden administration to censor things.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
So we just all this stuff is coming out now.
Yeah,
as you have said. So. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed it. Please, as always, stay safe and stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And as always, God bless America. And we'll see you again next week. Brian, I don't know. Can we do it at 10:30 next week?
Yeah.
Okay. I got something coming up. So
on Wednesday or Thursday?
Wednesday at 10:30. That allows
me Wednesday at 10:30. Be there, folks.
Be there. Happen. All right. So after that,
remind
I think
me.
back on schedule.
Remind me. Don't trust my old brain.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. We'll see you. Bye-bye.